black storm coming. See the lightning strike. Black people rising.
Almost as soon as he got back into the White House, President Trump signed an executive order that would end birthright citizenship, a right enshrined in the 14th Amendment to the Constitution.
Now, birthright citizenship means anyone born on U.S. soil is granted American citizenship, no matter the citizenship of your parents. But the president has clearly stated he wants to change this. He wants to end it.
Right. So how would you go about doing this? But first of all, let's talk about what the 14th Amendment is and how we got it. Eyewitness News reporter Darla Miles looked into the history of the amendment and how this isn't even the first time that it's faced some opposition.
The 14th Amendment was enacted after the Civil War.
Article 14, handwritten in 1868, reads, "All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside." The 14th Amendment, granting U.S. citizenship to formerly enslaved people during Reconstruction, guaranteeing the same rights and protection as any other U.S. citizen.
All persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens of the United States. It couldn't be any more clear.
Biddet Gershman is a distinguished professor at Pace University, an expert in constitutional law.
Legally, does a presidential executive order supersede a constitutional amendment?
Absolutely, absolutely no. It cannot do that. Even Congress can't supersede the Constitution. To supersede the Constitution, we need a constitutional amendment.
After the Civil War, Confederate states fiercely opposed the 14th Amendment, but ratified it in order to regain representation in Congress.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson, and for those of you who are new to the show, the purpose of the Umoja Circle is to correct errors where errors are found and to introduce facts where we find that so many people are working on fiction. And also, I believe that through dialogue can there also be a shift in your consciousness. And this is what my show tries to do, bring that shift in consciousness through dialogue between myself and you who are watching out there. And also, what I do with through the Umoja Circle, I use history to illuminate the present moment, okay? Because if you don't understand the past, you would never be able to figure out what's going on right in front of you in the present moment, because it's always unfolding. It's never staying the same, okay? I always use the example of in order for me to get up right now and go to where I park my car, I have to remember what I did with it in the past. It no longer exists. The present moment is always fleeting. But and I want to use this show to talk about, as you saw in the video clip, one of the amendments that are in the news right now, the 14th Amendment, which was specifically done for people of African descent, okay, to rectify the decision that was made in the 1857 case of the Dred Scott decision by Roger Taney, who was the Supreme Court Justice of the time, and what was going on in that past. And right now, the people who are in power in D.C. right now, and you know who I'm talking about, they are trying to adjust and change that 14th Amendment. And this is what I'm going to be talking about. And so just sit back and listen to how I dialogue with you, and I hope there's a little change so you'll understand how important it is to understand history. Without that illuminating light of history, you really get confused. And those who are in power now, who are throwing all kinds of information deliberately to maintain their power. If you don't understand what's at stake, if you become complacent, then that thing that you thought was the bedrock, those things that you thought were the bedrock of the Constitution, you'll find that they're not as solid as you might think, all right? Now, one of the first things I want you to understand that when the founding, let me start with a question that was asked to a gentleman you might know about in 1787. It was done by a young lady, a lady named Elizabeth Willing Powell. And she asked Benjamin Franklin in 1787, when the Constitution was put into law and getting ready to be sent out to be ratified by the various different colonies, she asked the question, Doctor, what do we have? Do we have another republic, or do we have another monarchy? And he said this very insightful question. He said, we have a republic if we can keep it, okay? If you can keep it. And those words are important for you to understand, that this thing, that what he meant was that the idea that the republic is not a self-sustaining thing. It is something that must be continually, as a responsible citizen, we must continually understand that it must be understood, and we must not fall on our duties and stop voting or not understanding who we put in power to run this republic, okay? Those founding fathers back then in the 1787 who put this thing together, they understood how fragile a thing that they put together, this republic, this democracy, this democratic republic. They understood that a republic can be infected by bad politicians. And if you're not vigilant, if you do not understand how important it is, you will lose it very quickly, okay? I want to start out with certain thoughts. I want you to understand that what you're seeing now in the news, in the political arena, I know some of you don't care about politics, but you better care about politics. All the things that you take for granted has everything to do with politics. Where you live, okay, where your kids go to school, or what kind of jobs are you going to be available to you? What kind of equipment are you going to have in your household? Everything that you see around you, there was a political decision in order to bring it into your presence or make your life as best as you can. Is a political decision behind it. So the system that you say you're not interested in, if you did not participate in last November's election, you see the results of how things are being dismantled right now. There's a political voting do have its consequences if you don't understand. And those founding fathers understood that. Let's go on to, I got a couple of images that I'll be putting up and I'll be discussing while I show these images. Now, one of the things that made me want to do this show is one of the topics that you heard in the little video clip that I started this was the topic of birthright citizens. All of a sudden it's in the news. So as I always do, I try to do my research, and I found a book called Birthright Citizenship, A History of Race and Rights in the Antebellum America by Martha S. Jones, okay? Now, people don't really realize that before the 14th Amendment, which established citizenship for enslaved people, like I said earlier, to address what Tawny has said, that no black person has any citizens' rights, that any white person need to take it, believe in or accept, okay, until this amendment was put in after the Civil War. But this book shows that black people were involved in establishing their citizenship before the Civil War. It goes back to the early 1800s, and it talks about free black men and women who were always part of the dialogue in how they were going to be treated. People don't understand that in places like New York, the College of New York, Maryland, Pennsylvania, there were free black citizens according to those state legislatures. Not what the federal government was saying, because according to the Constitution, you know, whatever whatever amendments was not enunciated in the Constitution, the states had their rights to do it. And some of these states made free blacks, not the enslaved black, free blacks citizens, but it still wasn't something that was federalized throughout the burgeoning United States. That's what I'm saying. It was a fragile mismatch of points, but we do not really understand how the system was put together. And I'm gonna try best to, talk about it in this show. Okay, let's go to this next slide. And another book that I have that I talk about, Slavery Defended. Now, and the reason I read this book, I learned from great scholars like Dr. Clark and Dr. Ivan Van Sertimer, people I've studied. They have to study the people that even though you don't agree with them. But you want to know what was the thinking of those men when they wrote about enslavement. There's a book, you find it in books. This book will talk about all the writings, newspaper writings, lecture writings, speeches of people who defended slavery, and what was their rationale, what was their reasoning, why did we have a civil war? And books like this, and that's not my copy, but there's an image of a copy. I have my copy here on the desk, but Wise and books like that will give you insight and what those who had power were thinking about it. And it ain't the way you being taught history today, folks. Let me let you know, if you read books like this, you'll really realize what white America thought about people that look like me, or people that look like many of you out there. Let's go on to the next slide. I want to come back to this thing called the present moment, okay? The reason I talked about earlier at the beginning of this show, I said that I tried to correct errors where people are working on fiction. We always focus on the present moment, okay? The news is the present moment, and all in the news right now, you're hearing about what's going on in Washington, what is being dismantled, what parts of the government is being dismantled. But if you want to understand why it happened, you had to go into the past. You cannot understand and fully come up with solutions if you do not understand the precedent, what brought you to these points, what decisions were made in the past. But if you look at the present moment, I wanted to make this point, this P-R-E-S-E-N-T moment. But if you separate the P-R-E and S-E-N-T, it tells you in that word, it was the present moment. Any moment in the present moment was sent to you by a decision, whether it was your decision and situations that you involved with personally, or it is something that the government made. You have to go into the past in order to understand it. You will never make the right decisions just by trying to understand things that's being bombarded to you through the media right now in this moment. It's too confusing. It doesn't work that way. You have to understand the past. You got to understand history. You got to go into the books to do your research. It's a slow process, but it must be done. Let's go on to the next. This is another word. It's called the zeitgeist. Now, this is a German word. I got a little definition. Let's go on next to what that word is. It's a German word. The zeitgeist translates to spirit of the time or the thinking of the time. It refers to defining the mood or opinions of a particular era, reflecting the intellectual, cultural, and the moral climate of the period. Essentially, it captured the prevailing ideas, beliefs, and attitudes that characterize a specific time in history. And the specific time I'm going to talk about is the time of those founding fathers. What was the zeitgeist of that time? How did they think? Why did they put that document together? That's not the way we're being taught. We're given what I would call a origin story, which is but not a fantasy. I mean, there's a play coming out a couple of years ago with about Alexander Hamilton, and he's rapping and doing all this. But if you really knew who he was, you would not be so enthusiastic about putting plays about Alexander Hamilton. Okay, what were the ideas? What was the reason why they put that document together that we always talk about, the Constitution? Do you really know? Let's go on to the next. Let's go. Now, this origin story that we are taught, that's what I'm saying, came from the minds and writings of a gentleman called George Bancroft. Okay, he was born in 1800, died in 1891. Who was George Bancroft? Most of y'all don't even know. But like I said, I like to do my research to make you understand. The origin story that you're being taught in school came out of the mind of this person. Okay, of how we look at George Alexander Hamilton, of how we look at James Madison, how we looked at and the dialogue that you're saying today, and the way we are talking about the Constitution and the bedrock, and is the greatest thing that came out of America. No, it came out of his mind. Now, who is this person? Okay. George Bancroft, again, from 1800 to 1891, was a prominent 19th century American historian. He was a statesman and a diplomat, and he's best known for his multi-volume history of the United States. From the discovery of the American continent, Bancroft's work is considered the comprehensive covering the nation's history up to 1789. That's when the Constitution was ratified. So all that information about the colonial times, the Revolutionary War, the Founding Fathers, came out of his writings. All the schools and scholarships, whether it was the elite schools to the lowlier schools, copied what he put on paper. Okay, his imagination. Okay, I'm not saying he's good or bad, it's just how he viewed it as the white man. Okay, that's the origin story. The source of the origin story is him. The reality is totally different, and why those founding fathers, so-called founding fathers, created the Constitution. Okay, let's go on to the next little more information about this man. Okay. That's the name of his book. His magnus opus, published in several volumes from 1834 to 1874, is a foundational text in American historical writing. That's what it is, foundational. It comes from his writing. Political and diplomatic service. Bancroft held positions including the Secretary of the Navy under President James K. Polk in the 1850s, and later served as the U.S. Minister to Great Britain and Prussia. He's a founding member of the Naval Academy. While Secretary of the Navy, Bancroft established the United States Naval Academy at Annapolis. So this man was very popular in the 1800s, and he lived through all the events that came after the Constitution was established, and he viewed it from a white male perspective. That's why you don't see anybody look like me or all the other black people that were very part of the American history. Okay, we put it aside in black history, but black people were very involved in the political events because it affected their lives. Okay, that's what I found in that original book called, about the 14th Amendment. It talks about what black people were doing between 1789 up until the Civil War. We did not sit by and just let things happen. We were involved in what was going on when they were trying to colonize us. We were involved in asking the question, we are citizens of Massachusetts, New York. And people don't realize that in New York State alone at the time, in the 1820s, there were over 20,000 free black people who were citizens of that state. Not under the Constitution and the Federals, but in the state level, they were citizens. But what did that mean? And they had conventions, okay? One of the books that I have over here is about the convention. This one right here, you see, the colored convention movement. And that was going on between the 1820s and the into the 20th century. We've always got involved with the political effects of us, and free blacks in the 1820s and the 1830s and the 1840s, they took part in asking these questions about how do we fit into this system, okay? But the Constitution was never clear about that, all right? Until the 14th Amendment. That was over 80 years later. Okay, so what happened in the first 80 years of America? The Constitution that people established all the rights, and the Bill of Rights and all that had no effect on black people until 81 years later. First 81 years of this country, we did not have the rights, even though we were citizens. So what does citizenship mean? Let's see if you're black. And if you want to understand what people today are talking about when they said the original intent of the Constitution, those judges or those lawmakers who always go into the original intent, they're not talking about the Constitution after the Civil War. You know, when those Reconstruction Acts, 13, 14, and 15 Amendment were going on, they were talking about this period of time, directly after 1789 until up to the Civil War. And that Constitution had nothing to do with us, okay? And that's what I want you to understand. So when you hear somebody today saying that, who are in power today, who are MAGA, who are talking about original intent, making decisions, Supreme Court justices who say, I'm making decisions based on original intent of the Founding Fathers, you will find out that the Founding Fathers were talking about before the 14th Amendment, okay? And that's what they're trying to bring us back to. Let's get that straight. Let's go on to the next. Okay, these are more of the books. This is the first volume that you can find today of the history of the United States by George Bancroft. Go on to the next. This is a series. This is the 6-volume series that he put, the magnus opus, which all historians after the 1870s wrote based on that book. That's where you get your origin story. That's why you could be able to put plays on with about Alexander Hamilton and make these wonderful things about these, but they were not like that. They if you really understood the zeitgeist of the time they wrote that document, the Constitution, it's a totally different rationale. They would be more in tune with MAGA today. I say that for a particular reason. They were about the elites. They were not about the masses of people. Let's go on to the next. Okay, it was his patriotic interpretation from the 1830s through the 1870s of how the founding generation, those framers, intended to write the Constitution. At least that's what the origin story he wrote told, a story about the creation of America and the Constitution that has been continually repeated to generation after generation of school children to this very day, this origin story. Okay, that's, I'm talking more about the 14th Amendment as we go on into the next part, because we're going to do a 2-part period. Let's go on to the next. But what if that's not what the Constitution was created to do when it was written in Philadelphia in 1787? Between May of 1787 to September of 1787, that's when that Constitutional Convention was going on, and that's what they created. That's that time period. It said nothing at all about due process, for example, or the rights of citizens, unless you were white, elite, male landowner. That's who that original intent by Alexander and Madison, that's all they were thinking about. The Constitution, as written in 1787, didn't have it in it any guarantees of fairness, no protection of individual rights, no Bill of Rights at all in it. Okay, that's how it was sent out to be ratified by the colonies. It had none of those things. So when people are talking about original intent of the framers, they're talking about this, before there was any Bill of Rights. Okay, so that's what they want to take you back to. That's why you see all the stuff being dismantled. That's why you see how they're treating immigrants, because all those rights for people like that came after the Civil War. Let's go on. This wasn't an oversight at all by those founding fathers. It was by choice. That's what I want you to understand. The framers of the Constitution, like Hamilton, like Madison, like Morris, etc., weren't interested in protecting everyday American citizens from the power of this country's elite. They were more interested in centralizing power and concentrating power. Let's go on to the next one. Okay. They wanted a centralized federal government that was able to collect taxes, enforce contracts, be respectable on the world stage, but most of all, crush any domestic resistance, like, for example, a year before the Constitutional Convention came up in 1787, you had the Shades Rebellion. You might have heard about that, when Revolutionary War veterans who were not getting, were quoting the earlier founders of the 1760s, the 1770s, who were saying taxation without representation because they were being abused. That's why they rose up. Okay, these founding fathers saw them as a threat. People like these farmers are the ones that they had the Whiskey Rebellion out in western Pennsylvania. They did not see the most of the people, common people, as the we the people that you see at the top of that document. The we the people was the elite. That's the thing that you don't understand when you're talking about when you're talking about the we the people in the process of everyday folks. That's not what the founding fathers were talking about. Let's go on. And as for the right of the average white American citizen, black people, women, and indigenous people were not included in this document. We hold so dearly. The framers saw these others as obstacles to what they wanted to achieve in forming a centralized government. They got together in 1787 to readdress the Articles of Confederation, which did not work for them. There was no centralized government under the Articles of Confederation. And they established this conference to fix the Articles of Federation, not to create a new constitution. But they used that Madison and Hamilton and some of them did a bait and switch, basically. And that's why they wanted to centralize and concentrate power into the elite. That's why they used the Rome as a model, the Roman Republic, where you had the elites at the top, okay, which were called the Senate. That's where we have a Senate. Okay, in Rome, they were called the wise fathers. And that's what these guys wanted, the zeitgeist, their thinking, they saw themselves as part of the elite. They weren't noble like in Britain, because even Alexander Hamilton said when he talked about the British Constitution, he thought it was perfect. They copied that. They copied that bicameral, the two areas. We have just like the House of Commons in England, and then you got the House of Lords. That's what the Senate was supposed to be, the House of Lords, and then you had the Congress with the House of Commons. But they represented those who had land, power. Not your average storekeeper, not your average teacher, not your average anybody. It was the elite, just like the Roman Empire. Everybody else was not considered citizens. I'm going to leave it right here because, as usual, time goes quickly. But you see what I'm talking about, and I'll continue on in the next show. But see, my point is that when you see this stuff called birthright citizenship in the news today, understand it was not something that was put together that, a groundbreaking and standardized thing. It can be changed, and I'm gonna talk more about it in the next show. Okay, it's in books. Okay, we did try to talk about these things. There is a reason that we have to discuss the birthright citizenship. But until next time, peace, hotep, bye-bye.